So Tarot Path working on the Tree of Life for the Greater Seattle Tarot Meetup. Today is December 17th, 2022, and it is, I don't know what time it is right at this exact moment. We're looking at 9:51 right now. Okay, so here is our general agenda for today. I'm going to give an overview of the Tree of Life and the 22 paths, and an overview of what Tarot Path working is. Then we'll cover a couple points in terms of best practices, and then I'll introduce both the correspondences for the 22 paths, which is one of the handouts, as well as the magical images. We're going to do a practice with some tarot spreads for pathworking, and I'll also introduce the concept of how to actually do your own pathworking. We'll possibly even do a actual practice with that. We also have some resources as well that I'll share with you. So overview of the Tree of Life and the 22 paths. And I totally let PowerPoint choose all my graphics this time, other than the ones that I intentionally uploaded. And some of them were amazing. I'm like, oh my God, this is so perfect. I don't know how they do that, but it's really cool. So we're going to talk about the Tree of Life, and I'm not going to get into the history of Kabbalah or how the Tree of Life fits into the broader category of Kabbalah, but it is from that tradition, which is a form of mystical Judaism. And the story that I'm going to work with in terms of kind of the origin story of the mystical origin of the Tree of Life is taken from the Lurianic tradition. He goes by the nickname the Ari. And so we'll be learning that kind of origin story of the Tree of Life, which includes the idea of the Tzimtzum. So I'll be covering that, as well as the lightning flash path, the serpent path, and then this idea of the 32 paths of wisdom. I've got some illustrations for this, so this is why I'm just going to introduce it and then go step by step with the illustrations. So the first thing here is the idea of these emanations. And so according to this story that derives from Lurianic Kabbalah, the idea is that the divine is everywhere. The divine is infinite and fills up all of time and space. And so because God fills all of time and space, there is nothing for him to interact with. They can't, there's nothing else. And so the divine needs to constrict their infinitude to create space in order to create something, in order to have something, make something besides themselves. And so that's the word Tzimtzum, which we saw right here, TSIMTSUM. It also can be transliterated with a TZ in both those positions. Tzimtzum is the word for constriction. And so the divine, which is infinite, constricts themselves and creates an emptiness. And into this emptiness, the divine extends a ray of light. And this straight line right here is the ray of light. From the ray of light emanate the four worlds. The story is actually much more complicated, and there are a series of things that happen, and not all of them work, which is really kind of fascinating. It's like, oh, well, that didn't work. Let's try this instead, kind of story of divine creation. But we're going to skip some of the really cool stuff and honestly just go forward with the facts. And so from that ray of light emanated the four worlds. And And that's the 4 large circles here. And there is, I'll say the words, you don't have to know these for anything, but I think it helps. I think there's something useful about hearing a word, even if you don't know it, even if you don't necessarily remember it. Hearing it, I think, can be very useful. And so the top world is the world of absolute. That means emanation. It's the element fire. The next world is the world of creation. It's called Greer, and its element is water. The third world down here is the world of Yetzirah. It means formation. So we've got emanation, creation, formation. Its element is air. And then down at the bottom, we have the world of manifestation, or Asiya. And manifestation, its element is earth. And so we have fire, water, air, and earth as these emanations. Now you can see that how these 4 worlds overlap. There are really obvious connections where there are more than one. There are things that are it's overlapping. And so wherever these overlaps are, we make a little circle. The top one is actually supposed to be open at the top, and I drew this wrong. I drew this many years ago, and forgot. I knew I was supposed to leave it open, but I forgot. Anyway, so the first overlap is right here. And then it goes, the next overlap is here, and then here. There's a really obvious overlap right here, but there's no circle there. These little circles are called the 10 Sephirot, and Sephirot means numeration or numbering. And so the one that's missing here, because it's so obvious, a lot of times it is used. There's a dotted line, and the name of the Sephira is Da'at, D-A apostrophe A-T-H, Da'at. And it means knowledge, but it is not actually included in the tree, because the Sefer Yetzirah says that there are 10 numerations, 10 Sephirot, and not 9, 10, and not 11. And so even though there's clearly something that goes here, it's more like, well, I don't want to get into that because I'm not going to explore it. So I'm just going to say, yes, obviously something should go here, but and they do put in what they call a quasi Sephira called Da'at, but we're not going to work with it. So then coming down here, we've got 1, 2, 3, then we get 4, 5, everywhere else where there's an overlap down through 10, we have those circles. So it's really obvious and logical and elegant how the 10 Sephirot emanate or arise from the 4 worlds. Then from there, once we have those 10 Sephirot established, we can then connect them with these linking paths. And those paths are technically called Navitot, N-A-V-I, T-O-T-H, navi as in navigation, and then just the and the ending in T, and then what is it, the feminine plural ending O-T-H, navit ot is the word, but we just call them paths. In fact, I don't really come across Navitot very often. Sephirot you see all over the place. Navitot I don't come across. Most people just call them paths. Technically, the 10 Sephirot are also paths. And so between the 10 Sephirot and the 22 Navitot, we get 32. And all of them are paths. So they call it the 32 paths of wisdom. However, generally, in general parlance, people just say the 10 Sephirot and the 22 paths. But altogether, it creates the 32 paths of wisdom. So now there is the idea of the lightning flash path and the path of the serpent. And the lightning flash path is also called the path of illumination. And it is the as indicated in the imagery on this yellow one, it's even like the path of, I think, the path of the flaming sword, the path of the flaming sword. And so that path starts here at Keter, and that's the hilt of the sword, and like a lightning flash zigzags through the 10 Sephirot from 1 to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that is the lightning flash path through the 10 Sephirot. The lightning flash path is the path of the divine coming down to the manifest world. Keter at the top is not the divine is beyond that. These are the emanations that came from when the divine extended that ray of light into the emptiness that was created via the symptom. So none of these things are the divine. The divine is beyond all of that. But Keter is the closest that we can conceive of. That is the divine is veiled beyond that, but it is the closest to the divine. Meanwhile, Malkut, the number 10 at the bottom, that's the closest to the manifest world. In fact, it's the world that we live in. And so we go from perfect unity at the top, which is the closest that we can conceive of to the divine is divine unity, down into infinite diversity in the manifest world, which is the idea that everything in the manifest world derives from divine unity. And so when the divine works, it works in this lightning flash path coming down through these Sephirot, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. If we want to work to come up towards the divine, we can't really follow that lightning flash path. It doesn't quite work that way. That's the way the divine comes down to us. What we have to do is follow the path of the serpent. And you can see the serpent's tail is wrapped around this one path back here. And that's where we start. And then the serpent's tail goes over here and we do this. And then it comes around, it kind of goes behind all of this, and then it comes out here and we do that one next. And then there's, I'm sorry, I missed one. We do this one, and then we do this one and this one. And you can actually follow, if you're careful to follow where the serpent's tail goes above and below, you actually can follow in pretty good order. The order to do the paths. The paths are numbered 11 to 32. Again, the first 10 are the 10 Sephirot. So the paths themselves, now the numbering, even though we start down here, we start at 32. The numbering starts up here with 11 here, and then 12, 13, 14, and so on and so forth. And so, so we're going backwards from the bottom up. I don't think you need to know all that, but if the diagram is numbered, which I believe it is, the one that I put in the chat, that might be relevant and useful to you. So this is our way of climbing the tree and getting closer to the divine. And again, we start at the bottom and we go in a particular order through the paths. they say that the path of the serpent is called the path of redemption, and it's also a path of study. And so that's what we're going to learn today, is how to climb these paths in order to reunite ultimately with each of these parts of ourselves, and ultimately climbing towards the divine, towards divine unity. Okay, I'm going to stop for a second. Are there any thoughts or questions about that?
I would say I've read this a lot online, and I've seen it in lots of different books. You've explained it in a way that I never understood it before.
Cool.
Ditto.
Oh, nice. Okay. So, and I'll give you my sources. There's, at the end of the slideshow, there is a slide with resources on it. One of my main sources that I really work with the most is John Michael Greer's Paths of Wisdom. And I pull a lot from Gareth Knight as well, his book, A Practical Guide to Kabbalistic Symbolism. So those are kind of my two go-to books when I'm working with the paths. Just to learn the 10 Sephirot, I prefer Dion Fortune's Mystical Kabbalah. So now I want to give an overview of tarot pathworking. So there are a lot of different ways of doing pathworking. And I said in the event description for this meetup, I pointed out that a lot of people will say that they're doing pathworking, and they're only actually they're just doing guided meditations. And somehow, somewhere along the line, the actual idea of climbing the tree of life via the paths got simplified into just guided meditation. Pathworking is not the same as guided meditations in general. And pathworking, even if you're talking about specific guided meditations on the paths of the tree, it actually is still more than that. Most methods of pathworking do combine a combination of studying, actually reading up, exploring the symbolism, learning about the Sephirot and all of that. Then discursive meditation, which is reflecting or thinking about these topics and kind of letting them kind of tumble over in your mind and trying to explore them, think about them, work with them until you get understanding of them, until you get insight into them, and so on. And then these immersive journeying meditations. And I use the word journey if you have ever studied shamanic journeying, the experience of pathworking is very similar to what you experience when you do a shamanic style journey. It's very immersive, very in a psychic realm or a subconscious realm or something like that. It's hard to explain if you have no experience whatsoever. Although it's one of those things you just kind of need to do it and let it happen. And I'll get into more of the details about how to actually do that. But those are the three components of most pathworking what's the word that I want? Like the structure of a pathworking course or whatever, is to read about it, to study it, to do the discursive meditations, and then to do the journeying meditations. So pathworking can be done alone or in a group. And you'll see that with especially some of the resources that I shared. I included a couple of books by Dolores Ashcroft Nowicki, and she has very detailed descriptions of meditations that she's done with a group. And the same thing with the Ciceros, Chick and Tabitha Cicero. They have, there's a book by Israel Regarde called The Garden of Pomegranates. And he that basic book that he wrote is a very good introduction to the Tree of Life, and it's short. But there's a big thick edition with a green cover that's been edited by Chick and Tabitha Cicero, and they include these, again, very detailed kind of guided meditations that they have done with group work. However, so even though it is, you'll come across a lot of examples of it being done in a group, remember that ultimately this is a very personal experience. And that's one of the cool things about pathworking, is that it is your way of having a personal experience of something that is otherwise fairly standardized in its symbolism. Some forms of pathworking are done as these, what I'm calling story meditations, where it's actually written out in paragraph form, a very, very detailed guided meditation. And in those styles, this is like the Dolores Ashcroft Nowicki. And again, I'm not even sure if she wrote those meditations ahead of time, or if she just used, or the writing that she's doing is more like a summary of what people experienced when they did the meditation with her. I actually don't know her work well enough to know exactly what that is. But the way they come across in book form is they look like these very detailed prose stories or experiences, descriptions in which the leader describes every detail that you experience. They're like, you're going to go, walk through a countryside, and you're going to come across a stone, and the stone is going to have this on it, and they'll tell you everything. That style of meditation actually can be useful for teaching the symbolism, but it actually doesn't allow for personal experience. In fact, it almost discourages personal experience. And so I don't actually recommend it. If you want to, again, I really recommend the two that I mentioned already, John Michael Greer and Gareth Knight. They both explain pathworking from the viewpoint that I'm going to teach it to you, which is much more about allowing yourself to have your own experience. But why this is important, and why I'm making this big deal about whether or not somebody tells you everything that you're going to experience, or whether you have your own personal experience, is for because of this next point. The 10 sephirot, the 10 circles on the tree, those are objective. And they can be learned, and they can have very detailed sets of correspondences assigned to them, and everybody can agree this is what this sephira represents. And everybody that meditates on that will even doing meditations and trying to find your personal expression of it, you'll usually come to a yep, what everybody else has said, I'm getting the same thing. The sephirot are objective. The 22 paths are subjective. They can only be experienced. They cannot be told to you what they are like. And so we can give you hints. In fact, John Michael Greer includes in his chapter for each path, he includes entities that you might meet on the path. He describes kind of landscapes or experiences that you might have. He describes a mythological principle that tends to be typical for that path. So there are commonalities without a doubt, but the actual experience that you have is totally unique to you. And so how we work this is we learn the 10 sephirot. We have just a very, very few specific symbols that we use for the 22 paths, and then we do these journeys into these paths to experience them ourselves. So the pathworking is a way to gain personal experience of the tree of life, guided by a limited set of standard symbols. And those standard symbols are the Major Arcana Tarot card, the Hebrew letter, and the astrological correspondence. So that's an overview of tarot pathworking. Here's just a couple. There's probably a gazillion best practices, but these were the two I could think of this morning when I was putting this together. And they're maybe the things that I've also seen people kind of things that I've seen trip people up when they don't follow these practices. And so these are the main kind of things to watch out for, I think. Always start at the bottom of the tree on the 32nd path and work your way up in a balanced manner. That means if you do a center path, then left, then right, left, then right, back to center. You're always going to do center first, then left, then right, and so on and so forth. When you do this, you will discover that you don't actually do the paths in order. And I am really bad for always saying, do the paths in order, do them in order. And when I say in order, I don't mean numerical order, 32, 31, 30, 29, 28, and so on and so forth. Because there's a couple times on the tree where you have to do it out of numerical order. Again, if this is a practice that you actually want to do, you'll definitely want to get John Michael Greer's book. I think his is the best in terms of being pretty straightforward, very accessible, really well written, very clear explanations. I just adore his ability to communicate things so easily and so clearly. But he'll take you through it step by step and do it all in the right order for you. But if you want to do it totally on your own, you don't want to buy that book or get it from the library or whatever, then you'll want to always keep in mind that you're going to do center, do left, then right. Sometimes you'll do a couple, like you'll do 32, 31, 30. And so that's 2 on the left. And then you'll go over to the right, 29, 28, 27, like this. And then you'll go into, then you'll go back to center again. And again, like I said, that comes a little bit out of order. And then to the left and to the right again. So just kind of keep that in mind. Try to stay balanced. That's the key point, is to stay balanced. A lot of times when I'm working with students, I actually have them do 32, then to the left and to the right, then I do the next 2. In fact, that might be how John Michael Greer does it. I try to keep it as balanced as possible. I had one student that was doing, it's one of those things, like, can I share this story? I think I can. This is a generic enough thing. Because I think it happens to other people. They were doing great work. It's not that they weren't doing really excellent meditations, really working hard at the process and everything, but they decided to follow a different system and then tried to follow their system, which is in a different order, and still keep up with my class, which was going with a different system. And they ended up doing the tree paths entirely out of order, and that can be extremely unbalancing. And so it's very, if you're doing a good, and that's why it was a problem. If you're just reading them, read them, and it doesn't matter if you read them in order, but if you're actually doing full on deep meditations with this, it really affects you on a energetic level, which manifests into the physical. And so these things are highly powerful forms of psychic development, and you want to stay balanced with that. Psychic and psychological development. So you want to stay balanced with that. And so I had to say, look, you can't do this class if you're going to do them out of order. You have to, and we're doing it in this order. And so you're going to have to stay with us. The other thing is take your time. I had another friend. I don't know. This is somebody that does really excellent work and really is thorough in the way they go about studying things, but they did a 1 month process of working all 32 paths in order, one at a time, one per day for a month, I guess a little bit more than a month. And that to me, again, would be way too fast and would totally unbalance somebody. They seem to come out of it fine. They usually tend to do pretty deep work. I don't know how it worked for them other than it seemed to be fine for them. I would not recommend that. But if you're maybe following all the other best practices and working within the tradition, I suppose it can be done. If you're really going full force with these, if you're really doing all of the study, all of the discursive meditation, and doing the journeys, the actual path working itself, one, you would have to have quite a number of hours in the day to do those one per day. But two, they're very powerful and they change you, and you need some recovery time in between, I believe. And you can certainly do a 32-day study without a problem, just doing the reading and discursive meditation on each one and try to learn it, and then go back later and repeat that, but in a more slow manner. They typically say that if you spend about, I don't know, if you spend a month on each one, that's 32 months, that's almost 3 years. So, and that's kind of typical, like really spending a month on, starting at Malkut, studying that Sephira, doing the discursive meditations on it, then studying the Sephira that's number 10, then going to number 9, Yesod, studying that, doing the discursive meditations on it, and then going into the path that connects the two, number 32, the path of Tav. I mean, if you spend a month on each one and really go through it, that can take 3 years, and that's usually what's advised. Obviously, if you have a lot of time, you could go through that faster. Okay, so the correspondences of the 22 paths, that's in the handout that I put into the chat. So now we're going to talk about the magical images of the 22 paths. And last month we talked about the magical images of the 10 Sephirot. Okay, so the magical images of the 22 paths. These are actually much, much simpler than the magical images of the Sephirot. And the magical images of the paths are these arched doorways. There's usually a door, there's a door or a curtain in it. And what you do is you imagine this doorway, and you imagine either on the door itself, you imagine the tarot card of the path that you're going to walk. And then in the keystone at the top of the arch, you imagine the Hebrew letter of the path that you're taking. And you imagine it in the color of the path. And so, for instance, so what that would look like is, here's an example for the path of Tav. We have a curtain here that has the world card in it. And then we have the letter Tav in the color indigo kind of engraved I tried to make it look engraved into that stone, but it seems to have shifted off center since I did it. Because I'm having a lot of bad luck with computers today. So that's kind of the magical image. You'll work to see certain colors, like the edge. I probably could have changed this, but I didn't really have time. The edge around the curtain, you would imagine in the color of the path, which is indigo for the 30-second path. And then, like I said, the letter is also done in indigo. So there's seeing the tarot card either on the door itself or on a curtain that you would step through, and seeing the letters. So that's all it is. That's all the magical image is. And then it's just whatever tarot card of the path that you're working shows up on the curtain, whatever letter of the path you're working that shows up in the lintel above the door. Okay. Oh, and so we're at the end of the slideshow part. Here are the books: Paths of Wisdom by John Michael Greer. I really recommend the Hebrew Letter Workbook published by BOTA. It teaches you how to draw the letters and also gives you some pretty good introductory material into their symbolism. You can also find really wonderful resources online for the Hebrew letters. My favorite, though, a friend of mine introduced me to something else recently, but I don't remember, unfortunately, what it was. But my favorite that I use is called inner.org, INNER, inner. It's a really extensive website on Kabbalah, but somewhere along the line, somewhere in there, they have a Hebrew letter section. Anyway, once you get there, they have all 22 letters, and then you click on each one and it goes into another page that explores all the symbolism of it. And so that's another really good resource. The Tarot, A Key to the Wisdom of the Ages by Paul Foster Case. There is one edition of that has color plates of the cards, of the major arcana cards. That's really good to study because it has the right coloring. And same with the Book of Tokens. There's an edition of that also that has, be careful of the tarot. There are editions without the color plates. So you want to make sure you look and see if you're getting one that has the color plates. The Book of Tokens also has color plates of the cards, and so it's really good for using to meditate. And these are those other, sorry, those are the other ones that I mentioned. I didn't mention Kabbalistic Tarot. He's good with just giving the general information on each of the paths. And those are the books by Dolores Ashcroft Nowicki. Gareth Knight has some other ones. So I also recommend, when you're doing pathworking, to have some specific decks that work more closely with the traditional symbolism. And so I like the ones with the double asterisk. They're most likely to have the proper colors. And so any Golden Dawn deck, particularly, I like the coloring in the Golden Dawn Temple Tarot by Wendrick Art House. But the Cicero's Golden Dawn Magical Tarot, the Golden Dawn Tarot by Robert Wang, I don't like that one as much. But there might be even newer ones out than that. Getting your own BOTA deck and coloring it according to the directions, or honestly, my boyfriend Hal got a extra copy of I don't know if it was Book of Tokens, I think an extra copy of Book of Tokens, and just use a razor blade and cut out all the color plates and laminated them. So he's got really nice BOTA color images that he can meditate with. Even a Tarot de Marseille or a Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot, or Crowley-Harris Toth Tarot, any of those are going to be good for having a good symbolism to work with. And then a personal deck to do your readings. One deck that's more traditional to study, and then whatever personal deck you like to use for your readings. Oh, I didn't even update this slide. Thank you for attending today. We're going to get into the tarot spreads next. And talking a little bit more about how to do the meditation. So thank you for attending Tarot Pathworking. There's my website, joyvernon.com, for information, classes, or to schedule a reading. You can find my blog at Completely Joyous. I do have quite a bit on Kabbalah there. Follow all of our great events, of course, at the Greater Seattle Tarot Meetup coming up next year. We're going to do a full year on the first Saturday of the month. We'll do a full year in-depth, or like a 10-month in-depth directed study of tarot and alchemy, and that starts in January. So please join us for that. And then the first Saturday of the month is tarot and alchemy. The third Saturday of the month is our general interest tarot and astrology events. You can check me out on YouTube, Joy Vernon Astrology Tarot Reiki. And as always, thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Thanks for showing interest in these topics. If you are moved to make a donation, which is not required, but if you're moved to do so, you can do it via PayPal to joy@joyvernon.com. Let's talk about some tarot spreads that we can use. Okay, so here is a link to a PDF of the a concise summary of symbols for each of the 10 Sephirot. And so I call it the Sephirot short list because it's just a short list of symbols for each Sephira. And so the 10 Sephirot, the circles on the Tree of Life, they're considered the objective things. They're the things that we can learn, that we can study. The 10 Sephirot are also considered states of consciousness. And so each one is a certain level or a certain type of consciousness that we can be in. For instance, the Sephira number 4, the blue one, Hesed, is called loving kindness or mercy. And so it's a state, this awareness of that state is a state of generosity, of love, of caring, and of mercy. And then over on the left-hand side, opposite to it, is number 5, the red one. That's Gevura, and that means severity or strength. It means fear. And it is the Hesed, the blue one, number 4, is building up. Number 5 is breaking down. And so there is a stark contrast between those. And all of us have experienced both of those at different times in our lives. We've experienced times of just being full of generosity and wanting to create opportunities and wanting to help. And we've had times in our lives when we want to destroy something, we want to tear something down, when we're fearful, when we need to be absolutely very strict with ourselves and we can't help another person because we've got to be firm in our boundaries. We've had those experiences as well. And so these are those states of consciousness. And so then when you're trying to work the path links from one state of consciousness to the other. So for instance, when we're doing the tree, we're always going from below to above to do the path working. So we would go to the lower Sephira number 5 and work up to the higher Sephira number 4. And so we would go from the state of Gevura, or of the severity, into the state of Hesed, which is the state of mercy. And so we would use the path that links those. And that path is the path of Tet. Tet, the Hebrew letter Tet, means serpent. And the card for it is the Strength card. And so you would explore what the meaning is for Gevura. You'd explore, you would study, read up, what are the symbols and the meanings for Hesed. And then you would allow yourself to have this personal experience of how do I bridge those two things that are actually very different? How do I bridge that? And the use that has in your everyday life is that if you end up, very few of us are just naturally balanced all the time. So, so when we're working those, that path, we're going to learn how to balance one sephira with the other. And, in that case, if you tend to be too generous, people take advantage of you. You're the nice person all the time. You always say yes to everything. You need more Gevura. And so by working that path, you'll learn to build up more Gevura in you to balance out your Hesed. If it's the opposite, if you tend to close down all the time, you don't tend to connect very well, you want to, you tend to have, possibly a negative attitude, or even tend to want to destroy things or tear things down a lot. If you're living in fear, or if you're living in anger, things like that, again, same thing. You've got Gevura is strong with you. You want to develop more Hesed. You would do that by working the path that connects the two. And so we can see that this immediately has some really nice ways of helping us become more whole and more balanced. You need to be able to have both. Now, again, we always start from the bottom. And so I want to start by exploring the two Sephirot on either side of the 32nd path, the path of Tav. And so below, at the bottom of that path, we have Sephira number 10, Malkut, and that means kingdom. And then above that, the purple one, Yesod, that means foundation. And so if you grab that short list, you can kind of see a number of correspondences. So we're going from the kingdom to the foundation. We're going from the physical level. Yesod is, if you'll look at that list, you'll see that it's the astral level. Sometimes you can consider it the subconscious. The number 10 Malkut is the earth, and number 9 Yesod is the moon. And so when you start to think about those from the earth to the moon, from the physical to the astral level, or if you want to go a little more psychological, we could maybe talk about the subconscious level. From the well, I forget now, even from the kingdom to the foundation. What does that mean? What are some things that you would think about that come to mind as you think about those two Sephirot as they relate to each other?
And I think that's the original breakout. Because number 10, Malkuth, is like the world we live in. And it's kind of like the way we see things, superficial. So then when we start to move up the Sephira, when we start to move up the tree, the next place to go, the closest place is, of course, foundation, the moon. So that's kind of like the unconscious. That's like the unknown. It's kind of like, because the moon's really, really cool symbol for it, because we only see one side of the moon our whole lives, most of us. Some people are astronauts. I know that Joy is a latent astronaut. Anyway, so we only see one side of the moon. So that's when we look from up to the moon, to the unconscious, to the unknown, to kind of like the psychic world. we have to travel the path of the 30-second path.
Right. Yeah, good.
Yeah. I want to say this word. We have to travel the 30-second Navita.
Yes.
And all the symbols and all the things that represents. And from my understanding of that, it's not always nice. It's not all sunshine and bumblebees.
Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a tarot spread or 2 or 3. I've developed several that I wanted to share with you. And then I'm going to talk to you about how to do the meditation. The very first spread that I want to show you, which I think is just very, very basic and very, very useful. It's 3 cards. You put 1 card to represent the Sephira below, 1 card to represent the Sephira above, and then 1 card to represent the path to get there. I would recommend when you're doing this spread to study up on the Sephira below. In this case, let's just use an example. We're going to go from Malkut to Yesod. Read through the short list and study up on Malkut. What are all of its symbols? As you read through that, pick 3 symbols that just kind of resonate with you, that you think help you understand Malkut better. Just jot those down. Discursive meditation is all well and good, but another word for that is journaling. You just write it down, like write down your thoughts on what is Malkut all about. As you read through the symbols, as you study it, what does it feel like it's all about for you? Just jot down your thoughts, your questions. Just do that. That's part of the practice. And then do the same thing for Yesod. Read up on it. Read the symbols in the Sephirot short list. Journal about it. Think about it if you want to. Do the discursive meditation. Journal about it. Come up, what are my thoughts? What are my questions? And once you have kind of an understanding of Malkut and Yesod, then pull a card. Here's a card to represent Malkut. This is going to give you insight into, this is the thing that you didn't think about yet that you should think about as it relates to Malkut. Then pull a card for the Sephira above, Yesod. This is going to give you insight into, above and beyond what your knowledge has. It's going to give you insight into what else there is to Yesod that you haven't picked up on yet. And then you'll pull a card for the path in between. And that card is going to kind of represent and I don't know exactly, it's a tarot reading, you have to interpret it, but probably it'll tell you what is the experience that you're going to have, what is the thing that you should focus on as you go through this meditative process. What will you learn from it? Maybe that's what that 3rd card is, the path to get there. It's going to give you either that idea of your experience or what your process might be, what you'll learn from it, something like that. The second one is a 2-card spread, and it simply is 1 card for knowledge. This is the knowledge I have of this path, and you could interpret that as what I need to know, what I'm going to learn from this path, my objective understanding of the path, and 1 card for the feelings I have around this path. How will it affect me? What's my intuition about it? What's my subjective understanding? I would go ahead and pull the world out and kind of meditate on it prior to doing the spread. And then the 3rd one is a little bit more in depth, although it's still not a lot of cards. So we're doing the Path of Tav, which is the world card. Actually lay out the world card. And then you're going to do my overall experience of the path, you'll draw a random card on top of the world, and then 3 cards below it, how I experience a card of the path, how I experience a letter of the path, and how I experience the astrology of the path. And those 3 things, the card, the letter, and the astrology, are the main symbols that we use to explore any path in pathworking. That one's a little bit more complicated, and you have to study and familiarize yourself first with what the card of the path and the letter of the path and the astrology of the path, what those things are, what they mean. So this one's not great to do right now, but you could do spread 1 or spread 2 right now. I said it earlier in the slideshow, but it bears repeating. In fact, I could repeat it over and over. The whole system of pathworking is going to contrast study against discursive meditation or thinking about something against the actual meditations or pathworking themselves, the journey meditations. And so the study is including, like, me telling you, here's a list of correspondences. That's part of the study. The discursive meditation can be you just meditating on the tarot card. It can be you meditating on any of the ideas that came up in your study, meditating on the symbol. Why are these symbols for Malkut? Why would these get chosen as a representative of Malkut? Meditate on that and find your own answers. Connect with your own inner wisdom or your guides to receive these answers. Then do the actual pathworking meditation. So I mean, there's a lot here. How to do a pathworking meditation. So there are 3 basic steps to this journey style pathworking meditation. Incidentally, this is also called scrying in the spirit vision. The first step is to establish the lower sephira. The easiest way to do this is using the color of the sephira and its magical image. Second, enter the path via its magical image, which is the door with the tarot card on it. A guide may or may not accompany you on the path. Third, connect with the archetypal energy of the card of the path, the letter of the path, and the astrology of the path. So that's the full extent of what a pathworking meditation ultimately is. So for the path of Tav meditation, you would, and that's the 32nd path, that's the first one we would do starting at the bottom of the tree. First, you would establish the 10th Sephira Malkut using its colors citrine, olive, russet, and black, or of course only use black or olive to simplify. And then you would see its magical image, which is the young woman in a plain black gown with bare feet and loose hair, sitting on a throne of rough-hewn black stone. Then you'll see the arched doorway. The arch is the color of the path indigo. The Hebrew letter Tav is in shining white on the keystone. And you'll see the card in all its detail on the doorway. From here, just open the door and step through. You just have to let your experience guide you from this point. The idea from here on out is to get in touch with, find the tarot card in this environment and connect with it. Then find the Hebrew letter Tav in this environment and connect with it. Then find the astrological association, which is Saturn. So you'd see the glyph of Saturn. Find that and interact with it. Those are your 3 touchstones. Let the experience be unique to you. To review, here's a list of bullet points to help guide you through this process. One of the things is to not, even as you follow your own experiences, which is important, not to stray off the path though. And that's why you do this, find the card, find the letter, find the astrology, because that keeps you on the path so that your experience is personal, but it is within the guidelines and the limitations of what that path is about. And that's how to do a pathworking meditation. So the one last thing I want to cover is how to use pathworking for self-initiation. essentially climbing the tree from the bottom to the top via the path of redemption, which is also the path of the serpent. That's the path of study, is an ideal do-it-yourself series of self-initiations. You become initiated into each path that you work. So there's 32 paths for 32 initiations, for progressively more refined states of consciousness, while becoming more centered around divine unity. By following this 3-year curriculum of study, discursive meditation, and immersive pathworking meditations, you can approach this in a slow, steady, and balanced manner as a path to enlightenment. Thank you for joining me for Tarot Pathworking on the Tree of Life.